Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we'll be answering a question from our audience on how has the U.S. response evolved as it recognized China's rise as a superpower, and what are the implications of this changing dynamic? And I'd really say that they started off extremely dismissive of China. I think they thought that after the century of humiliation, China was gone as a potential competitor forever. I think they also got a little bit arrogant that only people of maybe like European descent could actually form like really competitive world superpower countries. Because remember, the United States and Soviet Union, it was primarily Anglo-Saxon people in charge of the United States, and primarily Russian, which are of European descent as well, in charge of the Soviet Union. So I think there was an arrogance there and almost a racism, that kind of colonial mindset, I guess you could say, that China really was not going to be a major competitor ever again, and that it was kind of an anomaly that they were a competitor with European powers for so long. And I would even go so far as to say that they were dominant compared to European powers for so long. And so the first word I would use to describe the U.S. strategy and how the U.S. response evolved over time would be dismissive. I think the United States just completely dismissed any potential China had to rise as a competitor. How has the U.S. response evolved as it recognized China's rise as a power? The second word I would use is unaware. United States was using the strategy I talk about all the time, which was they focus on other countries and they rotate which country they focus on in order to keep their own populace fearful. And so they were jumping between Venezuela, Cuba, Iran, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, all of these countries. The United States just went back and forth playing whack-a-mole, just beating up these countries, bullying its populace, exploiting the people, extracting their resources. And so the United States was playing its traditional game of whack-a-mole in order to keep its own populace fearful of external threats. And because of that, they really were completely unaware of the growing power of China. I mean, there's really, I don't think any other way of putting it, because they were dismissive enough that they offshored a lot of industry to China. Because remember, the United States was half of the manufacturing capacity of the world after World War II. And now we're saying that United States and Europe combined form about the same manufacturing capacity as China alone. So for some reason, the United States was extremely dismissive, and then I would say unaware of China's growth. And so they were dismissive enough to offshore and make China the world sweatshop, as the United States like to say. But then they were unaware of China using that manufacturing capacity in order to grow as a nation, in order to become a more developed nation, a less poverty-stricken nation. And so they were just unaware. They were focused on other things. They were focused on the war on terror, the war on drugs, et cetera, et cetera. And they didn't see China's rise. I mean, I don't know how you don't see it. I don't know how you don't have people specifically monitoring for this type of thing, but maybe it's just arrogance because they thought they were at the end of the history and there would never be a real major challenger arising. The response the United States had to China as China was rising as a superpower changed to cautious, really, I would say in the 2010s, where you see a lot of propaganda starting to rise about China. However, there was a lot of business interest that said, well, no, actually, we really like working with China. We benefit a lot from working with China. And so they kind of slowed the government response to China's rise, the American government response to China's rise. And so there was a caution there, and there was kind of a pivot. It was a very slow pivot to recognizing China as a major competitor to the United States. And I like to talk about really the major turning point being around the pandemic, where China was seen as a major, major threat to the United States. And around that time, and really a couple years earlier, I guess you could say as well, the United States really started to recognize China as a threat. And so the United States tried to use its normal strategy of playing whack-a-mole with various nations. They tried to do some sanctions. So they started the trade war against China. It really started around 2016 under former President Trump. And they also tried to foment tensions between China and its neighbors. They tried to do color revolutions within China. So they had Hong Kong protests that they started. They started to do more in order to make sure that Taiwan was never given back to China. They really went with what I call the normal strategy, the normal tactics of doing everything they could to divide and conquer. We started to hear about like Tibet needing to be freed, right? Even the Tibetan people liked China better than their former Tibetan overlords. Tibet was a feudal society where a lot of people were treated extremely poorly before the Chinese government took over. And so I think I even remember reading that the most, like, it was something like the most Communist Party members or the most people who had like the Communist Manifesto, things like that, were in Tibet because of the fact that there were so many former Tibetan serfs who were just treated poorly. And so they absolutely adored China for coming in and making sure that they were treated fairly as people of equal value as their former overlords. And so you had United States and various Western powers trying to foment dissent and fracture China through Tibet. You started to hear about the supposed Uyghur genocide, even though everything seems to be completely fine there. It seems to be a completely fictitious genocide. So United States really went with its normal strategy. And we're starting to see, I would say around 2021 maybe like a year or so after the pandemic started, that United States' response to China started to change quite a bit. They started to realize the implications of China's rise, and they started to recognize that they weren't at the end of history anymore. And so the normal strategy that the United States goes for just wasn't working anymore. And so the United States started to go on what I consider to be a warpath. I am nearly entirely convinced that the United States is going to try to have a physical, violent confrontation with China by the end of this decade, so sometime pre-2030. And so the United States is on a warpath. All available evidence is showing that. You have United States military commanders saying we're going to be in a war with China by 2024 or 2025, so shoot for the head and things like that, like just very violent rhetoric. You're seeing China, which typically would not directly name someone that they're upset with, name a nation that they're upset with, now talking about America directly. Now you're seeing white papers, policy briefs, executive summaries coming out saying that United States is fomenting rebellion, fomenting tension all throughout the world. United States is a huge problem. And the only reason they would start doing this is because of the fact that they think that they have enough evidence that the United States is not looking to try anything else. There's not really an off-ramp to further tensions, further escalations, and probably a military conflict. Xi Jinping has been talking about how things are going to become more and more difficult for China. Things are going to become worse for China. Not worse in the sense that they're going to be doing poorly, but worse in the sense that there's going to be a hostile power coming for them. And so all available evidence is showing that America is their response in the future for at least the next decade before the United States collapses is going to be an outright warpath. They're doing everything possible to manufacture consent for a war with China. And so this is how I view the United States response to China's rise and the kind of changing dynamics between these two powers. The United States started off as dismissive. Then it was just completely unaware because they were focused on bullying other smaller nations. Then they were cautious, thinking that, well, we're still at the end of history, so United States China's not going to rise that highly. And I should also mention here that it's not really happened overly often that developing nations become developed nations. And so they were just cautious at this point because they just didn't think it could happen. They didn't think a country of China's size could pull off what China's pulling off. Then they went with their normal strategy. It's like whenever they bully a smaller nation, they're like, okay, this is what we do. We foment tension, we create color revolutions, we do economic sanctions against them. And they realized that wasn't enough. That wasn't working. And so all indications are pointing to the United States wanting an outright war at this point. And it's very scary. A war between nuclear powers, the two strongest powers that we've ever seen throughout history. I think it's very clear at this point that China has surpassed what the Soviet Union was capable of, and so that's the situation now. And so if you like this video, and I don't mean you like the grim nature of some of the things that I was saying, but if you like what I'm talking about, if you think I'm accurate, please like the video. And if you want to hear more content from me, please subscribe to our channel. And I also read all of the comments, so if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please put it in the comment box below. And I hope you like that, and I hope this video, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you for watching. Bye.